Hello and welcome to another intensivecarehotline.com and intensivecareathome.com live stream. Today is another episode of Ask Me Anything. I am answering your questions live on the show. You're welcome to send any questions here that are related to intensive care at home. If you have a family member in intensive care, you can type your questions into the chat pad, or you can use the link that I'm just pasting here now. You can talk to me live on the show here and either get on camera or not get on camera, but talk to me directly here. Now, my name is Patrik Hutzel. I'm your host for the next hour or so. What makes me qualified to answer questions for families in intensive care and intensive care at home? I am a critical care nurse by background. I have worked in critical care for nearly 25 years in 3 different countries, where I worked as a nurse manager for over 5 years in intensive care. I've been consulting and advocating for families in intensive care since 2013 at intensivecarehotline.com. And I can very confidently say we have saved many lives with our consulting and advocacy, and you can verify that if you look at our testimonial section at intensivecarehotline.com, or if you look at our podcast section at intensivecarehotline.com and verify what our clients are saying. I'm also the founder and managing director of intensivecareathome.com. With Intensive Care at Home, we are sending critical care nurses into the home for predominantly long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomies, but also for home TPN, BiPAP, CPAP ventilation without a tracheostomy. For our clients that have a tracheostomy but are not ventilated, we provide port management, central line management, peak line management, Hickman's line management at home. We also provide palliative care. And we also send our critical care nurses into the home for emergency department bypass services. With Intensive Care at Home currently, we are operating all around Australia in all major capital cities, as well as in regional and rural areas. We are an NDIS approved service provider, TAC and WorkSafe in Victoria, iCare in New South Wales, NIISQ in Queensland, as well as the DVA all around the country. We're also providing level 2 and level 3 NDIS support coordination. We are the only provider in Australia that actually has third-party accreditation to provide intensive care at home nursing, and we have the workforce to deliver on that. We employ hundreds of years of intensive care nursing experience combined, and our workforce is we have around 100 critical care nurses on the road providing the intensive care at home service and improving the quality of life, and in some cases quality of end of life for our clients and their families. Now, also want to welcome anyone that's watching this on replay. I do these weekly YouTube lives once a week. And you're welcome to join me and ask any questions here, but you can also type, if you're watching it on replay, type your question below and then I will answer it in a video at some point. But obviously the quickest way to reach out to us is at intensivecarehotline.com directly or intensivecareathome.com directly. So without further ado, let's look at some of the questions that have come in during the week, and I will answer them. And like I said, if you have any questions in the meantime, just type them into the chat pad or join me on the StreamYard link here. Now, first question that is here from Lucy. Hi, Patrick. I agree with your videos to a point, but the intensive care team also dislikes causing suffering. I hate seeing patients kept alive for people, seizing, being sedated to tolerate the tube for days on end, for families to get a second opinion, then realize it's the same opinion, not accepting recommendations, bringing stories of other people surviving, CT brain, EEG, testing all confirm severe hypoxic brain injury and status, but still the miracle is wanted. And had he died days ago, it could have been more peaceful, less agony, and now he will most likely breathe for half a day or die from a pneumonia after a month because he cannot cough or stop seizing. Death is part of life and needs to be respected. Getting a bed is the last reason to pull out a tube. Well, patients should leave the intensive care. You can't force doctors to do things to patients. It is not in their best interest, and the decision to palliate is always a collaborative one with family, but not for family to decide. The burden of that decision is with those who have the knowledge of what is best in keeping with their wishes. Well, thank you, Lucy, for your detailed email and comment. And you know, and I respect all views and wishes, you know, but I do want to make some points here. I think we all dislike suffering, okay? And whilst I fully agree with you that death is part of life and that it needs to be respected, I am very much of the opinion that it is not up to doctors and nurses to make life or death decision. I do believe that it is up to doctors and nurses to honor a patient's and the family's wishes. Now, one of the problems is that most patients in intensive care do not have an advanced care plan, which means it comes back to families to give input and make decisions. And that can be very difficult. But, you know, let's just say you go with what you say in your email that, you know, suffering should be diminished. Well, we have many families reach out to us weekly, daily, and say, my loved one passed away in ICU 12 months ago. We gave in to the intensive care team. We believe that what they said, that it's not, quote unquote, in the best interest of, or for my family member to live. And now we have second thoughts. What if we tried everything? Do you as a family want to live with that guilt? I also believe that the burden of decision making, families are fine with it, right? I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we were working with a client, and again, the ICU wanted to push for withdrawal of treatment, and what I believe was prematurely at the time, and it was prematurely because when we advocated, the client lived for another 2 years and was very happy to be alive. But let's come to the burden of decision making. So the ICU at the time said, oh, we'll make the decision because we know what's best, and we don't want you to live with the burden of deciding that your family member should die. Well, in the absence of an advanced care plan, and there was no advanced care plan in that situation, the family wanted to make the decision, and they were very happy with taking the quote unquote burden of decision making. There was no burden of decision making lying with families. The burden of decision making lied with the intensive care team wanting to kill a patient, right? And that family said, look, we have no problem with making decisions here, and we have no problem standing up for our decision. And it was the right decision because, you know, this lady lived at least for another 2 years, saw her grandchildren being born, and was very happy to be alive, you know. So, and like I said to you, Lucy, many families come to us 12 months later, 6 months later, having sleepless nights because they gave in whatever the intensive care told them, intensive care team told them, without seeking that second opinion. Now I'm an intensive care nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even remotely pretending to be a doctor, right? But I argue we can give second opinions just by looking at medical records, by talking to doctors and nurses directly and saying, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? What we're also finding over and over again is that intensive care teams are not transparent, right? They are not being transparent. You know, when we say, hey, why has this not been done? Why has that not been done? Families have no idea that there are options, right? So also life is to a degree suffering. You know, we're all happy to be alive, of course, but to a degree life is suffering whenever you go through problems, you know, life's throwing you curveballs, whatever the case may be. That is suffering. Does that mean we shouldn't live because we're suffering? Unfortunately, treatment in intensive care often means suffering, right? But it also means that most patients, I haven't heard it otherwise, are very happy to be alive. So why should we bring on premature death to someone when we know that suffering is sometimes the answer? Also, what you are not saying in your email is approximately 90% of patients in intensive care survive. So the odds are actually in a patient's favor. Once again, why are we not telling that to patients and families in intensive care when they first enter ICU? Why are intensive care teams bringing in the negativity, bringing the doom and gloom in spades, right? Why are we not focusing on the positive? Are there situations where a premature death could prevent suffering? Yes, absolutely. And would a patient have died, would a patient die regardless, even if we try everything? Absolutely. But once again, many families live with the guilt of not having tried everything, right? They want to make sure their loved one can go out with a fight. And I see nothing wrong with that. And you can debate me on that. That's fine. Leave your comments or join me here now if you want to debate it. And I'm all for a peaceful death, if you can facilitate that for someone who's inevitably dying. And that also comes back to what I've written about and made videos about for a long time: real versus perceived end-of-life situations, right? So, for example, a real end-of-life situation is a situation where someone's going to die. No fancy treatment, no fancy surgery, no medication, no nothing will save this person's life. A perceived end-of-life situation is when intensive care teams say, well, we don't think that it's quote unquote in the best interest for this particular person to live. We think it's quote unquote in the best interest for this person to die. That's a horrible statement from my point of view. Why do people go into nursing, intensive care medicine if they want to play God, right? Also, you're also referring in your email, Lucy, about CT brain, EEG testing, all confirmed severe hypoxic brain injury. So I've made a video yesterday. It'll come out in the next couple of days, again, where we've saved someone's life with our consulting advocacy, where someone went into ICU with a hypoxic brain injury after cardiac arrest. ICU wanted to withdraw treatment. We gave all the right advice to push back. The family did not want to withdraw treatment. And now 2 weeks later, their family member is slowly but surely waking up. Yes, there is some level of brain damage, but they're very happy for him to be alive. And he seems to be very happy to be alive. Will he have a long road of recovery ahead? Probably. Is that the better option than someone being dead? I think so. I am very pro-life here, as you might have figured. And, and if you're not, that's fine too. But I do believe we have to honor life as being sacred. And we have to preserve it at all costs. We have seen what can happen during COVID if we don't preserve life at all costs, or if we let people die without their families being around during COVID. That's an exercise that must never be repeated. Also, you're saying in your email, death is part of life and needs to be respected. I could not agree more with you. Death is part of life and needs to be respected. But we also need to make sure that before we make death part of life, that we have tried everything to preserve life. And that is what I'm advocating here for. You're also saying getting a bed is the last resort to pull out a tube, or for patients to leave the intensive care dying. I could not agree more with you, and that has always been my point of criticism, that when I worked in ICU, I'm well aware of the bed pressures in ICU. There's not enough beds, there's not enough staff. There's things happening 24/7, and one way to empty ICU beds is to let people die. And another thing you have to keep in mind here is that families don't know what they don't know. They just believe everything that intensive care teams say, and I'm just giving families a platform here to make up their own mind. You're also saying, Noemi, you can't force doctors to do things to patients. I disagree there. I strongly disagree there, because that is part of our advocacy. That is exactly part of what we do. We have saved many lives to remind doctors of their duty of care, to remind nurses of their duty of care. So I strongly disagree that you can't force doctors to do things to patients. And you're also saying if it is not in their best interest, well, what is in someone's best interest? That is up to perception and not up to the doctors and nurses. You're also saying the decision to palliate a patient is always a collaborative one with family, but not for the family to decide. Again, I strongly disagree there, Lucy, because the decision often is not a collaborative one. That's why patients and families, or families in particular, come to us, because it's not a collaborative decision. Families are being told, oh, tomorrow at 3 o'clock we withdraw treatment. That's not a collaborative approach. But that's what I've seen over the years. That's the phone call we get every week here at intensivecarehotline.com. And I've talked about, you're also saying the burden of that decision is with those who have the knowledge. Well, everyone has knowledge. And like I said, I can give you plenty of examples where the family has absolutely no problem with the burden of decision making. They have zero problem with the burden of decision making. As a matter of fact, the reason that they need consulting and advocacy is because the decision making has been taken away from them, or it's trying to be taken away from them. They are very happy to take the quote unquote burden of decision making. There is no issue with burden. It's not being able to make decisions. So, but thank you for sharing your thoughts. You know, I'm always happy for a debate, and I'm always happy to take different opinions. And I'm also very happy to share, you know, my point of view. That's what a healthy debate is all about. Okay, please. Now I will move on to the next question that came in during the week. But in the meantime, you can also type your questions into the chat pad, or you can join me live here on the show and talk to me directly if you click on the StreamYard link that I posted here. I'm very happy and very eager to answer your questions. We're very curious to hear what you've got. Now, just need to make a note there. And then I can move along to the next question. If you don't have a question, typing into the chat pad, or if you don't want to join me here live on the show. Now let's move on to the next question. From Joanne. Joanne says, hi Patrick, I went into sudden cardiac arrest 28th of September 2022 and was found totally unresponsive, having no pulse, no brain activity, no electrical activity, and was not breathing according to my daughter. My daughter did CPR for 15 minutes prior to the paramedics arriving, who did a further 15 minutes of CPR. Once they got a weak pulse, the defibrillator was used 3 times. I was still unstable, but was ventilated and transported to the emergency room with a GCS reading of 3. I went into ICU and put into an induced coma, still ventilated for 6 days. I left the ICU 9 days later, and I was put back into a medical ward for 16 days. My brain scans came back good with no major problems, although I have no memory of 1 day prior to the event and 3 weeks post cardiac arrest. The doctors informed my family on a couple of occasions that I wouldn't make it, but if I did, I would be in a vegetative state. I was found to have aspiration pneumonia, septic shock, 2-time bad infections, hypothermia. I survived an SCA that I was classed as clinically dead with no major damage to my brain except short-term memory loss. I am so glad they didn't give up on me in ICU and switched my life support off. I tell my kids now that I wouldn't wake up because I was tired and just needed a peaceful sleep. Do not give up on anyone. Give them time to heal, just like me. Some people take longer than others. Well, thank you so much for Joanne for sharing that. I mean, that goes contrary to the previous email that I read out where, you know, someone was saying, well, the ICU team is always right when it comes to palliative care, which I obviously openly disputed here. So, Joanne, thank you so much for sharing this. You know, that's a testimonial of someone that suggests similar to me. Do not give up on your family members, and never give up, and don't let ICU teams dissuade you by you are in charge, and you need to act like it. And in most jurisdictions, the law is on your side. Intensive care teams are very good at pretending they can do whatever they want. Well, the minute you challenge that, you will see that they backpedal. But you actually need to start standing up. That's part of the problem. One thing that I hear over and over again when talking to families in intensive care, they're so intimidating. Well, stop being intimidated. That's how you choose to respond. You don't have to be intimidated. You cannot control other people, but you choose how to respond. And if you respond being intimidated, that is something you can control, and you can take control of, and you can just stop being intimidated. You just need to change your approach. That's all. Now, I have another email here from who identifies as South Park comedian. And he or she says, Hi Patrik, my mom is 61. She had a heart attack and cardiac arrest for 30 minutes. It has been 5 days. She's awake. She's breathing on her own. She reacts to stimuli, and she will use her eyes and head to follow you. We are not sure to the extent of her brain injury, but all these things give us hope. She still has the ventilator in, but because she isn't following commands and the doctors are afraid she won't be able to clear her pathway, we need to make a decision on putting in a tracheostomy, or, and South Park comedian puts that in quote, letting nature run its course. Well, thank you so much for sending this email. Now, this is a situation we get multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, right? So what you need to do in a situation like that, you need to change the conversation, okay? So the intensive care team in a situation like that is trying to take a black and white approach. The black and white approach is your mom either needs a tracheostomy or needs to die. You need to forget about that. You should be asking the intensive care team what to do to avoid the tracheostomy and keep your mom alive. That's a very different conversation to have, right? So the good news here is this. The good news is your mom is making progress, right? And yes, you're not aware of the extent of her brain injury at this point in time. However, here's the thing. When patients come out of an induced coma and don't have a brain injury, they're also struggling with waking up, right? So you haven't mentioned anything here that, they've done CT scan of the brain or an MRI scan of the brain, and we don't really know whether there is brain damage. But one way or another, the question is still, what is the intensive care team doing to avoid a tracheostomy and keep your mom alive? So change the conversation. The question is, are they trying to do everything beyond the shadow of a doubt to keep your mom, or to wean your mom off the ventilator, keep her alive, and avoid the tracheostomy? That is the question that needs to be asked, right? It's a super important question you need to ask. For example, I don't know where you are. I presume you are in the US. If you are doing a tracheostomy in the US in particular, many patients are being rushed to LTAC, and you don't want your mom to go to LTAC. You absolutely don't want your mom to go to LTAC. If you're in another country, if you're in the UK or if you're in Australia, you still should be asking that question. A tracheostomy should be the last resort and should only be done after day 10 to day 14. You are only day 5. Your mom is only day 5. Very early days, right? So turn that conversation on its head and say, what are you doing to avoid the tracheostomy and get your mom off the ventilator as quickly as possible, and let them explain to you what they're doing to achieve that. She needs to come off sedation, she needs to come off opiates, Don't worry too much that she's not obeying commands yet. She may simply not be ready for it. Similar to our previous email from Joanne, patients that are critically ill, they need to wake up in their own time. They sometimes just need to rest, right? So just give it more time and ask them, what are they doing to wean your mum off the ventilator, avoid the tracheostomy, beyond the shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't even go down the track of engaging a conversation about end of life. Change it to a different conversation. Now, Rick Sinclair here. Thank you for your comment here. Is it unusual to see the comment? The event monitor was off during this recording during EEG for signs of brain activity. The event monitor was off during this recording during EEG signs of brain activity. I don't think so. I wouldn't think so. Because that's the purpose of monitoring for EEG. That is the whole purpose of it. Can you give more context, Rick, around that? Can you give more context around that? You can also join me here live on the show if you want to, and just click on the StreamYard link, and then you can talk to me here directly. But it's the answer is no, but I don't have enough context. Right, that's what I thought. So I thought it was weird that it would say that anywhere on the EEG report. Yes. Why would they have the event monitor off? That's the whole purpose of monitoring someone. All right. Any other questions there, Rick? Or otherwise I'll move on to the next question that I have. So next question is coming from next question is coming from Peter, who says, oh, there is someone coming on.
Hi.
Hi, Faith. How are you?
I'm good. My screen name was Rick, so
Fair enough.
that was my my dad with the EEG.
Right. And
they were trying to diagnose him with brain death.
Right. And what happened in the end?
They ended up donating his organs, or they ended up declaring him brain dead.
Okay. Do you think it was accurate?
I don't think so. I mean, I've been continuously trying to learn more about it since then, and I still don't believe it. It's actually, the more I look into it, the less I believe that diagnosis.
How long ago was that?
Almost a year.
Okay. Do you know if 2 independent doctors did brain death testing?
I'm pretty sure that not officially, there was he had a large care team, but 2 separate neurological experts, or do they have to be specialized in that field typically?
They do. They do.
Yeah, I think there was only 1 neurologist I noticed on his reports, but he wasn't even present when he was declared dead.
So it's only afterwards that you had second thoughts?
Well, I wasn't. Someone had already okayed the donation and all that before I had called. I live in a different state, so it was a little bit harder.
I see. You were more or less hands off.
Yeah, I was able to contact them one time over the phone, and then I couldn't get them to pick up the phone after that.
Right. And you weren't the power of attorney, so you really couldn't stop whatever was happening.
No, but yeah, no, and there was dispute over the power of attorney, but the hospital ended up choosing, yeah, someone who okayed it.
Mm. Do you have access to the medical records?
I do. A lot of them seem to self-contradict. I'm trying to see if I can pull them.
Mm.
Oops. Oh, I can't pull it up with the camera on right now. But yeah, and I've been trying to like learn more about what they all mean ever since then. But um, they also didn't give us all of the records, and I managed to make my dad my chart account, and that's actually how I got most of the most important records. It wasn't through the record request.
How many days passed between ICU admission and your dad being declared brain dead?
It looks like it was only a couple hours before they started planning for, at least planning for it, and then it was only 3 days from admission until they actually did the organ procurement. So
Three
it's
days.
before any of his test results came back. So it's before they could have possibly known their prognosis.
So we're talking about hours, not even days.
That's what it seems like. There was just that's based off of one single comment that I noticed in his medical records that said uh, something about one of the family members bring it like one of the family members brought it up, actually, not even the doctors, that he would have wanted to donate his organs, but this was when he first like barely got to the hospital. And so but it commented, it wrote at the end of the comment, coordinating with the organ procurement team and planning on palliative extubation. He was
Interesting.
originally admitted for a cardiac arrest, but like unknown cause of it.
Wow. Wow, that sounds, like if there's a few days passing by and all the tests are being done, you know, fair enough. But it sounds to me like just by what you're sharing here, it's all being rushed, or it was all being rushed.
Yeah.
Did your dad have an organ donation pass? Was he a voluntary organ donor?
He his license did have the donor sign on it at least. So that's a little reassuring, but he wasn't registered in that state. He had just barely moved there. So they still needed the permission from someone to go forward with it the way they did,
Right.
especially to go forward so quickly before they knew
Mm,
the prognosis or the
mm,
diagnosis.
right. Right. Um, wow. Okay. And are you seeking any recourse or?
Yeah. It's I'm not sure what claim I should be focusing on with that type of issue. Should I focus on the inaccuracy of the medical record, or because it's more competitive to get a lawyer to take your case for medical um, lawsuits. So I'm not sure what aspect would be the like most promising claim.
I couldn't tell you because I am not a lawyer. I'm a clinician. How what we could focus on um, if you wanted some help. We can look at the medical records whether we think there's any foul play, and then you can take it to a lawyer, right? So I couldn't tell you what would be the most promising way to go about it. Where we can definitely help you is looking at the negligent side of at the negligence.
Like the medical standards of care and all that.
Yes, medical standards of care.
All right.
Have there been any? It sounds to me like they couldn't move quick enough
Yeah.
if we're talking about hours.
Yeah. And
Normally, what I've
yeah.
seen when I've worked in ICU, if you have someone coming in where there's a high chance of them being brain dead, you would still wait 2, 3 days to get all the testing done. Also, make sure the families understand, that there's a process and that there's due diligence.
Yeah, we've been asking, or I've been asking for the hospital policies since it first happened, and it's been almost a year, and they still haven't let me see that even just a hospital policy, which I mean, I'm pretty sure the U.S. laws regarding organ donation require you to have a specific policy in place that you follow the same way for everyone.
100%. 100%. Nothing, I've been saying this here for the longest. Nothing happens in a hospital without a policy. Mopping the floor, cleaning the window has a policy. So brain death testing, organ donation definitely has a policy.
Yeah. This was in Arkansas, so I've had to try to catch up with the laws over there because it's so different from California.
Right. Yeah. Right. And do you have any other family members that also have second thoughts, or is it just yourself that's sort of digging into this?
I'd say about half of my family members. Not many of them are totally against the idea of a malpractice suit, but at least half of them are they're at least not interested in pursuing it. But there's still a lot of people that fully agree that it wasn't whatever it is that happened wasn't right, and it's just hard to grasp what really it was that happened because it's so confusing.
Yeah. How old was your dad?
He was only 60.
That's not very old.
Yeah,
Not...
he had a previous injury he had been in a severe car accident a year earlier, but he was mostly recovered from that at that point. But they tried to use that as an excuse, like, oh, he's been in and out of the hospital all year, trying to make it sound like he was sicker than he was. And I realized this later on after I reviewed his medical records. And yeah, they were just trying to exaggerate his injuries, and he had a midline shift in his brain from his car crash, but that had actually improved. From his last scan, it was actually the best it had ever been since his car crash. He still had one, which they use as an excuse, but it had actually gone down by I forget what the measurements goes by, like a millimeter or it had
would be by millimeters. Yeah, would be by millimeters.
Yeah, and they still never bothered to find the cause of the cardiac arrest event either.
Yeah, because they had other priorities.
Yeah.
By the
half
looks
of
of
his
things.
test results didn't even the result date for half of his test results from that last hospital stay, they didn't even come back until after they had already declared him dead. So they didn't even check him.
Right. And if I may ask, who's signed off on it? Was it a family member, or did they override you as a family?
Kind of like a little bit of both. There was so his sister, who had been kind of out of the picture for until right when this happened, all of a sudden she was saying that she was power of attorney, and they still haven't let us see that form though that supposedly she had. And then they called when she was the one that I had brought up the idea of organ donation. Before anyone even asked her. I would assume before most people would naturally think of in that situation. Like it was so fast. But and then they called my brother, and the problem with that is that they lied to him about my dad's current condition. They told him he was already dead. That I forget if they told him he was already dead or already brain dead. But either way, he wasn't either at that point. His death certificate even states it was 2 or 3 days later that he was actually declared dead even. After they had called my brother. So they basically said okay, so he's already dead, and we just need permission to if it's okay to donate the organs and make some use of it. That's how they said it to him. They lied to him, and that's been added a lot of extra trauma to him for him to have to deal with, because he feels he's feeling some responsibility for it, even though it wasn't he didn't have the right information.
You mentioned that they said to you or to your brother that he's dead or brain dead. Now, in most jurisdictions, when someone has been declared brain dead, in most jurisdictions, they are then also legally dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, having said that, there was a case in 2013. I don't know whether you've heard of it. It seems like miles away now. But there was a case 2013 in California. There was a young girl with the name of J.I. McMahon. She was a 13-year-old girl declared brain dead after a tonsillectomy, cough going horribly wrong with the cardiac arrest and whatnot. The family took that to court and said, no, we disagree that when someone is brain dead, they're not legally dead. We believe that our daughter is still alive and so forth. And the courts then gave the family the ability to transfer their daughter to New Jersey, because in New Jersey, apparently, brain dead doesn't equal legally dead.
Or they allowed I think it's the only state that allows religious exemption. Or
I
at
would
least
assume that family was religious. I would believe so. I don't know the ins and outs. What I do know is that they transferred her to New Jersey, and she lived there for a few more years before she passed away.
Yeah, I've seen videos of her responding to commands. Yeah.
Yeah. So, who's drawing the line, what people perceive as being dead when the heart is still beating?
And they're trying to change the definition of, or add to the definition again, it seems like recently. And so it's like, it kind of makes, for me at least, after that personal experience, it really feels like every time there's something that's outside of the realm of what they're allowed to do. I mean, like the organ procurement organizations, it seems like all they do, like their strategy is just to change the definitions of words or to make up new words until it seems legal or acceptable. And then they
Yeah.
just do it regardless of whether or not the public has approved it or voted on it or whatever.
Yeah. Changing the goalpost.
Mm-hmm. Rather than actually achieving it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do believe we are on a very slippery slope at the moment, as a society. In how do we deal with life? How do we deal with death? Especially in those situations when patients are in intensive care. COVID has put a whole different spin on that. People were dying in ICU without families being present. What door did we open there for hospitals to do whatever they wanted while families weren't?
Yeah.
So we are on a very slippery slope here, I believe.
Yeah, I think well, not all hospitals, but like at least
No.
the ones that lack ethics, they saw it as an opportunity for themselves for their personal gain. I mean, the COVID situation, and they really have been kind of lawless since then, or at least, my experience.
Very much so.
And actually, one of the things that I only had one real request when I was talking to them on the phone, which was just let my dad die naturally, please, then. And they didn't want to take him off of life support because they wanted to keep his organs viable.
Of course.
So they wanted to keep him on all the life support and not let him have a natural, peaceful death. But at the same time, he's not worth extra efforts to save. It's, it's counter.
Double standards.
Mm-hmm. It didn't make any sense that his organs were worth the effort, but he wasn't. So.
It's yeah.
And the last things I said before I hung up the phone was, you have to wait as long as possible, like, because they were saying it's going to happen. They're going to take him to the OR within a few minutes when I was hanging up the phone. So I said, postpone as long as possible. Like at least give me an hour just so I can call my lawyer and consult and figure out what my dad's rights are in the situation. And he was declared dead 2 minutes after that phone call hang up by a coroner, supposedly.
Did you speak to a lawyer at the time?
No, not that day. I called Adult Protective Services and then immediately called the hospital back they weren't picking up calls at that point.
Wow. So you felt like really it was just slipping out of your hands without any, with
And
you
I
out
say,
being any, my goodness.
yeah. And then when I reviewed the law, like even the state laws for Arkansas, I mean, it looks like the law or like the HHS rules even, it says that the hospitals are required to inform everyone what their rights are when there's a dispute or something like that. And the fact that I specifically mentioned I need to consult a lawyer, I need to know what my rights are and what my dad's rights are, and they did the opposite, that's, obviously it's offensive because, I mean, this is about a human life and valuing and respecting human life.
Do we? Like, I don't know whether this is a much wider debate, but I don't know whether you are aware of what's happening in Canada at the moment. They are more or less advertising euthanasia. If you've gone
Mhm.
bankrupt, if you are disabled, you can sign up for euthanasia. If you have a
Yeah,
mental illness, what happened to personal responsibility? What happened to valuing human life in all forms?
yeah, and it feels so similar to like similar at least to what's going on here, but yeah, they're just advertising it like it's
Just
out
no
of
big deal.
empathy.
No
Yeah,
big deal. There's an app. You can book your euthanasia appointment at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. No big deal. We'll take care of it. That's
yeah,
where we're going.
yeah, and there's so many horror stories already, and Canada, that's pretty fresh idea over there, isn't it? Or how long has that been happening
I
there?
guess Justin Trudeau. I don't want to get political here, but Justin Trudeau. Like this lefty lunatic, in my eyes, woke madness. In my eyes, I
The
think it's
illusion
all
of
Justin
progressive.
Trudeau over there and woke
Yeah,
culture. I don't know
yeah,
where we there's no more God now. Now we'll just euthanize people.
yeah, and it's the issue that people don't immediately recognize, I think, is the slippery slope issue
Slippery slope.
that it really is
Yeah.
that it's not only the people in severe pain that doctors are going to do this to or allow for this to happen to when we legalize it, especially like how Canada has done it without you're like the first thing you should make sure are established and in place are the legal safeguards when you're doing something so risky.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's like the last concern or last priority in Canada how they've done it.
Well, but it's also coming back to your situation. It also sounds to me like that was the least of the concerns for the hospital. They just seem to rush from one thing to the next. Couldn't take care of it quick enough, could they? By the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, by the time I called, it was, the same day they declared him dead, and so he was already in the hospital like three or so days by then, and so they had already gotten approval to do so. They had already planned it, and now I was coming in, I was probably just annoying to them at that point, like coming and being the first one to dispute it.
So Faith, so from admission to hospital to your dad being declared dead, how much time did pass?
He was admitted on January or July 2nd, and he was declared dead on July 5th.
3 days, 72 hours.
Hmm.
Wow.
And I thought, is it true? Uh, are they required typically to um, know the cause of death to declare brain death? I thought that was a requirement for brain death in the U.S.
Um, so that part I couldn't answer you. What do you know what's in the death certificate?
It says cardiac arrest. Yeah, and right above it,
Mm,
right above the cardiac arrest, it says it recommends or it says don't ever write cardiac arrest or never write a mechanism of death as the cause of death and gives the example cardiac arrest as what not to write. And right below that, they still wrote cardiac arrest.
doesn't sound right to me if he was supposedly brain dead.
Exactly. And the only cardiac arrest he ever had was on July 2nd, not the 5th. So that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And he just happened to have a cardiac arrest 2 minutes after the phone call hung up. I just, I don't think I think because it was a confusing situation, the person who was writing the certificate was probably misunderstanding what was going on. But I mean, that's their job. So
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That's very,
yeah,
very sad.
yeah. I
Um,
think the whole issue is also like uh, a disability rights issue because of the whole like quality of life uh, catchphrase that they like to use a lot and things like that, and they assume that they really try to act like prognosis is undisputable, but prognosis is just a guess, and they they act like they don't know that when they're during these conversations.
and they also act like, oh, if someone has a disability, because comes out with a disability out of an intensive care stay, they act like, well, their life is not worth living.
Yeah, exactly. and
Who's
and
That's
just
not
because
for them.
he was physically disabled, like I said, from a car accident, but he still wasn't sick. Besides the physical disabilities, he had already mostly recovered by then. So overall, he wasn't a sick person. And right
And,
before the car accident, he was very in like amazing shape. So like it's he wasn't as bad off, nearly as bad off as they try to make him sound. But in their words, just because he was in and out of the hospital, that means he was a sick person.
he was very happy to be alive, it sounds like.
So grateful. It says it throughout his records, and every time he met with a occupational therapist or anyone like that, he would say he would be so grateful they showed up. He'd be so happy to do his exercises and so motivated. That's the number one thing everyone always said who met him is that he was so motivated.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we are, like I said, the whole, when I talk to families, when I talk to doctors, this, oh yeah, this person won't have any quality of life, so what's the point? Well,
Hmm.
who are you to make that judgment?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah.
And
And
what's the other question that I always have in a situation like that is, what's the rush in killing people? Where's the hurry in that? Tell me
yeah,
why.
it's like they're almost afraid of that person recovering.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. And his GCS was a 3, or I forget if it yeah, it was a 3 for his last hospital stay.
If it was even a 4, he would not have been brain dead.
What about 3?
3 might be brain dead, but when I say might be, this is where time comes in. So there's plenty of patients in ICU right now, they might have a GCS of 3 because they are in an induced coma,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's hard to say if they really ever gave him enough time off of
Correct.
the sedatives.
Correct. you know as soon as you take someone out of an induced coma, if they are not brain dead, their GCS should improve pretty quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, and would it seemed like the protocol they used for they would keep him in medically induced state, like induced coma state, most of the time, and then they would give him a few hours off of the they would give
Sedatives.
him propofol. Like so of course he's not gonna respond, but I
so
don't
are
know.
you so are you saying they were using propofol even though he was already declared brain dead from their end?
Oh yeah, they were still using anesthetics on him after the declaration of brain death.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, a lot of the medical records don't totally make sense, and a lot of them contradict themselves. They'll say one thing and then the opposite thing the next page. So it seems like a lot of the notes in there, or at least some of the notes in there, seem to be like haphazardly just written in to compensate for not having a diagnosis and things like that. I don't know. Because, like, for example, I think they tried to blame it on a lactic acidosis, his state he was in, but that doesn't make sense because he had a acute. kidney injury. His kidneys were working fine before then. So my understanding is lactic acidosis takes a while for the acid or buildup of material in from your kidneys not functioning, right? It has to be chronic kidney failure.
Look, there's other things that could lead to lactic acidosis too, including electrolyte imbalances, which is not uncommon for patients in ICU.
Yeah,
But
and
again,
she also was on a lot of medication still, so I don't know how much that affected it.
Yes, most likely, most likely. So, so what are your next steps? Are you considering a medical record review, or or are you just trying to get more information?
Yeah, well, before I had all the records, I had ordered a medical review from your company, and but it was kind of a lot of guessing even at that point because we didn't have a lot of the medical records yet, or we hadn't found a lot of them yet. But I was
Right,
considering possibly paying for one-on-one consults, like preparing all the records that now that I've had a lot of time to study them, like instead of just paying for another review of the records, I was thinking about maybe instead scheduling a one-on-one consult after I put together which records I think are most important, or at least which ones I have questions on still specifically.
right, right. Sure. Yeah, now I remember now, Faith, of course. Yeah, we're talking to so many clients. I do apologize. I do remember
Yeah,
we were reviewing earlier in the year.
yeah,
Yes,
I called you I think like the week after it happened.
right. Yeah, yeah. Do you know the volume of the medical records? It can't be that big if it was only for 72 hours.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, it's a pretty big stack overall just because we have the whole previous year worth of medical
Right,
records too, just to compare to see the validity of his medical condition, like of the prognosis to see and to try to figure out what caused his cardiac arrest. But the it's only like I think around 2,000 pages if you include all the nurses' notes and whatnot for the last hospital stay. But a lot of his appointments from his car accident injury were at the same hospital that he ended up dying at. So some of the records are kind of mixed.
right, I see. 2,000 pages just for the 72 hours?
Well, I think that document includes pages from earlier the year too.
From
I think
earlier,
that's
yeah,
like,
yeah. It sounds too much like 2,000 pages.
yeah, I had to combine the nurse's notes document, which was I think at least 100, and then the one that the hospital actually gave us, which was like 1,000, no, 700, and yeah, so maybe it's more like a little over 1,000, probably just if
Mhm,
it's only for
mhm.
those dates. But and
Right.
what kind of labs are usually um like important for them to track in those
Sure.
situations?
So in a situation like that, they would need to look at all the pathology results, starting from full blood count, like hemoglobin, white cell count, electrolytes, but also like coagulation. Do you know what I mean with coagulation?
Yeah, he did have it said like delayed clotting time or like PPT. It was like it would take too long to clot.
Yeah, yeah. Things like that. They would have to look at every little detail because, you would want to find out why did he have a cardiac arrest.
Mm.
Also if he was going for organ donation again, you would need to look at the clotting time and all of that. What's the risk? Would an organ potentially bleed out by taking it out if the clotting time isn't right? Things like that all need to be considered.
Yeah,
There's nothing they shouldn't really be looking at.
yeah. We have the hepatic panels and kidney panels and all that.
Absolutely, all of that. And they would have looked at hepatic and kidney, especially with the view of organ donation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying.
Did they donate kidneys and liver?
I'm not sure totally everything they got. I assume. Well, I don't know. Yeah, because if he had kidney and liver damage, then I'm not sure what would even be useful. Because he also had when he had the car crash, he had a collapsed lung, so they're not getting the lungs out of it either. I don't know what they were
Right,
trying to get.
right.
I know they took his corneas and some skin grafts and bone marrow or something.
Okay. Okay. Faith, I do need to wrap this up. I usually only have an hour to go.
Okay.
If you wanted to continue the conversation, you know how to get hold of me, or if you wanted us to look at medical records. I really appreciate you sharing, your story publicly with our audience. I think it is really important that, if you are in a similar situation, that you try to put a stop to it as quickly as possible, because from, hearing your situation, they couldn't move quick enough by the
Yeah.
sounds of things, which is
Yeah,
horrible.
it sounds like it seemed like almost hearing my disagreement with them moving forward with it seemed to rush them even faster. They started moving forward even faster as soon as I called. It seemed like as soon as they knew there was a dispute. But yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Faith, for sharing. And if we can help you with the medical record review or with anything else you need, you know how to get hold of me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. All right, so I'll wrap this up for today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We also have a membership for families of critically ill patients in intensive care that you can get access to at intensivecarehotline.com. If you click on the membership link, or if you go to intensive care hotline directly, click on the membership link, or go to intensivecaresupport.org directly. In the membership link, you have access to me and my team 24 hours a day in the membership area and via email, and we answer all questions intensive care related. Also, I offer one-on-one consulting and advocacy over the phone, Skype, Zoom, WhatsApp, whichever medium works best for you. I talk to you and your families directly. I talk to doctors and nurses directly. I ask all the questions to the doctors and nurses that you haven't even considered asking, but must be asked when you have a loved one critically ill in intensive care. All with the goal of you making informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence, making sure your loved one gets best care and treatment. We also offer medical record reviews in real time so that you can get a second opinion in real time. We also offer medical record reviews after intensive care if you have unanswered questions, if you need closure, or if you are suspecting medical negligence. And all of that you get at intensivecarehotline.com. Call us on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or send us an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com. Also, if you like my videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel for regular updates for families in intensive care. Click the like button, click the notification bell. Share the video with your friends and families. Comment below what you want to see next, what questions and insights you have. I also do a weekly YouTube live where I answer your questions live on a show like today. And you will get notification if you are a subscriber of my YouTube channel or a subscriber of our email newsletter at intensivecarehotline.com. And also check out intensivecarehome.com, where we send critical care nurses into the home. We are currently operating all around Australia. Once again, check out intensivecarehome.com. Thank you for watching. This is Patrik Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com and intensivecarehome.com. Take care, and I'll talk to you during the week. Take care.